The first thing I saw when my garage door rolled up was a porcelain crane staring at me out of the dark like it paid the mortgage. It was 6:12 on a damp Tuesday morning, and the metal door was still rattling on its track when a folding chair tipped over and clanged against the concrete hard enough to make me flinch. The smell hit a second later. Mildew. Old cardboard. That stale, sweet odor of cheap candles and water-damaged fabric that tells you somebody's junk has been sitting too long in a place it never belonged. I stood there in my work boots with my coffee cooling in one hand and my tool bag hanging off my shoulder, just looking at a wall of clutter where my truck should have had room to breathe. A broken patio umbrella leaned against my workbench. 3 plastic tubs with cracked lids were stacked where I kept my extension ladders. A chipped end table blocked the cabinet where I stored replacement springs and opener brackets. And right in the middle of it all sat that ridiculous white porcelain crane with a red Christmas ribbon tied around its neck, like somebody thought adding holiday cheer would make trespassing feel classy. My name is Ethan Walker, and at that point in my life, that garage was the closest thing I had to stability. I'm 38, I fix garage doors and whatever else people with normal jobs don't have time to fix, and after my divorce, that house in Willow Creek was what I could afford without having to start my whole life over in a 1-bedroom apartment above a nail salon. The garage mattered because that's where my tools lived, where side jobs got organized, where invoices got stacked, where I rebuilt the pieces of a life that had come apart cleaner on paper than it ever felt in real life. Every shelf in there had a purpose. Every drawer had a place. And now half of it looked like a discount estate sale had exploded in the dark overnight. I stepped inside, my boots crunching over a layer of grit that definitely had not been there when I locked up the night before. That was when I saw the note. It was taped crooked to a yellow storage tote with painter's tape and written in the kind of neat, aggressive handwriting that always looks polite until you actually read the words. Temporary HOA storage. I just stared at it for a second, letting the sentence settle in my head like a bad smell. Temporary HOA storage. In my garage. Not a request. Not a mistake. Not even a fake apology. Just a label, like Brenda Whitmore had walked onto my property, filled my space with her cast-offs, and decided the right wording could turn entitlement into policy. If you've ever dealt with someone like Brenda, you know exactly the kind of woman I'm talking about. 50-something, blonde in that expensive, shellacked way that never moves in the wind, white SUV always polished, smile always 2 seconds away from becoming a warning. She was the HOA president of Willow Creek and the self-appointed queen of everybody else's square footage. The kind of woman who could say community standards like she was reading from scripture. I set my coffee on the hood of my truck, reached for the first plastic bin, and realized I couldn't even get to my ladder rack without moving half her mess. That's when my phone buzzed with a reminder for an 8 a.m. job across town, a double-door spring replacement in Round Rock, and I felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Something steadier. Because the second I looked at that porcelain crane, that stupid little ribbon, and that note taped to my tote like she owned air and concrete and boundaries, I knew this wasn't an accident. Brenda hadn't just stored junk in my garage. She had made a decision about my life without asking, and people like that only understand one thing when it finally comes back around, the moment their confidence gets dragged into daylight. By 6:40, I was on my knees in my own garage, moving somebody else's warped picture frames just so I could reach the case that held my torsion winding bars. Dust coated my palms. A dried pine needle stuck to my sleeve. One of Brenda's plastic bins gave off that sour attic smell, like old fabric and trapped summer heat, and every second I spent touching her stuff made my jaw lock tighter. I am not a dramatic man by nature. I fix things for a living. I tighten what is loose, replace what is worn out, and keep my mouth shut when customers need to complain about things that are not really about garage doors. But there is something about another person filling your space without permission that gets under your skin in a very specific way. It is not just the inconvenience. It is the message. I can do this to you, and you will work around me. I made my 8 a.m. appointment with 4 minutes to spare, shirt already damp between my shoulders, coffee long gone cold, and the whole drive to Round Rock I could still smell mildew in the cab of my truck like I had brought her mess with me. The customer, a retired school principal named Mr. Hargrove, met me in slippers and a Baylor sweatshirt, apologizing for calling so early. I told him it was no trouble, but when I opened my tool case, I realized one of my sockets was missing because I had been rushing through clutter that did not belong to me. It took an extra 20 minutes and a second trip to the truck. 20 minutes is not the end of the world until you stack it on 3 more jobs, gas, traffic on Interstate 35, and the kind of day where one delay turns into 5. By lunch, I had already lost enough time to cost me money, and money was not exactly growing in the glove compartment. After the divorce, every bill had a personality. The mortgage was the stern one. The truck payment was the impatient one. Health insurance just sat in the corner like a quiet threat. I had bought that house because it gave me one thing I needed more than pride or curb appeal, a garage I could work out of. Not a man cave. Not a hobby room. A workspace. The kind of place where a person with calloused hands and a decent reputation could build back a future one service call at a time. Willow Creek looked respectable when I moved in 2 years earlier. Fresh mulch at the entrance. Matching mailboxes. Flags on front porches in the summer. The realtor used words like stable and family-friendly and well-managed, and for the first month I almost believed I had gotten lucky. Then I met Brenda Whitmore at my mailbox. She had on pressed white capris, spotless sneakers, and sunglasses big enough to make a courtroom statement. She introduced herself without smiling and glanced past me into my garage before she even said welcome to the neighborhood. Not looked. Evaluated. That was Brenda. She did not see people. She saw surfaces, violations, leverage. A week after I moved in, I got a notice about visible storage because I had left 2 unopened moving boxes in the garage with the door up for maybe 15 minutes. The month after that, she sent me a reminder about approved trash can placement, complete with a highlighted diagram. When I replaced the rotted side gate with cedar pickets that matched the original, she somehow appeared before the stain had dried to ask whether I had submitted an architectural request form. Every exchange had the same polished tone, as if she were doing me the kindness of supervision. Standing in traffic at a red light that afternoon, sweat drying at the base of my neck, I finally understood what that junk in my garage really was. It was not storage. It was escalation. Brenda had tested paper on me before. Notes. Emails. Rules. This time she had tested physical space. And the people who do that rarely stop on their own. I got home a little after 6 with the sun still hanging hot over the rooftops and my driveway glowing that pale gold color concrete gets at the end of a Texas day. The second I killed the engine, I saw the garage door sitting 2 feet higher than I had left it. Not wide open. Just enough to tell me somebody had been inside and wanted me to notice. I stepped out and the air smelled like cut grass, warm asphalt, and that faint chemical scent from cheap plastic that had been baking all afternoon. My stomach dropped before I even hit the remote. When the door rolled the rest of the way up, I did not get my garage back. I got more of Brenda. 2 extra storage tubs sat near my workbench. A brass floor lamp leaned against the wall where I kept my lubricant shelf. And on top of my rolling tool chest, like some kind of trophy, was a wicker basket full of fake lemons and dusty blue hydrangeas. Decorative nonsense. The kind of clutter people buy when they think style can cover bad character. I stood there listening to the motor. Click to a stop, and for a second the whole neighborhood went strangely quiet. No kids on bikes. No dogs barking. Just the soft hum of an air conditioner somewhere down the block and the dry rattle of leaves skittering across my driveway. Then I heard heels on pavement. Brenda came around the front of my truck carrying a clipboard and a stainless steel tumbler, moving with the relaxed confidence of somebody who had already decided the conversation was over before it started. She glanced into the garage, then at me, like we were both admiring a successful improvement project. "Ethan, there you are," she said, all smooth and bright. "I meant to catch you earlier. We needed a temporary overflow solution for community materials." Community materials. I looked past her into the garage again. There was a broken lamp, a cracked mirror, a stack of holiday bins, and what looked like an old bathroom cabinet with one hinge hanging loose. None of that had ever improved a community in the history of North America. "That is your junk in my garage," I said. My voice came out flatter than I felt, which probably helped. Brenda took a sip from her tumbler and lowered it slowly, the way people do when they want to seem patient on purpose. "It is temporary," she said. "The clubhouse closet is being reorganized, and several board members agreed your garage was the most discreet option." I actually laughed at that. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes nonsense arrives dressed so formally there is nothing else you can do. "You did not ask me," I said. She tilted her head, just a little. "We tried calling." I checked my phone right there in front of her. No missed calls. No voicemail. No text. Brenda watched me with that same chilly calm she wore at board meetings, then gave a small shrug like facts were a matter of personal taste. "In any case, it is already here," she said. "I am sure a cooperative neighbor can manage for a few days." Cooperative neighbor. That was how she framed submission. Like she was grading character and I was one polite sentence away from failing. I took 2 slow steps into the garage and pointed at my ladder rack. "I have work at 6:30 every morning. I need access to my tools." "Then maybe you should consider better organization," she said, her eyes drifting over my shelves, my neatly labeled hardware bins, my hanging cords, my cleaned and sorted tracks. The woman was standing in the middle of the most organized garage on the block telling a man who worked with his hands that he needed better organization while her broken lamp leaned against my wall like it had squatters' rights. Then she smiled. Not wide. Just enough to show me she knew exactly what she was doing. The kind of smile that says the rule is whatever I can get away with until somebody stops me. That was when I noticed the camera mounted under my eave, angled clean across the driveway and into the garage opening. Brenda noticed my eyes flick toward it and her expression tightened for half a second before smoothing out again. Tiny thing. Easy to miss if you were not looking for cracks. She turned, tapped her clipboard with one manicured finger, and said she would have everything removed soon. Soon. Then she walked back across my driveway in those white shoes like she had just done me a favor. I waited until her front door closed before I stepped fully into the garage and looked around the way I do on service calls, not as a homeowner, but as a man trying to figure out how something failed. Every item had been placed, not dumped. The bins were stacked to leave a narrow path. The bigger pieces blocked the exact shelves I used most. This was not random overflow. This was calculated inconvenience. And right there on top of the yellow tote, still tied around the neck of that white porcelain crane, the faded red ribbon stirred in the warm evening air like a little flag marking territory. The next morning, I beat the sun by 20 minutes and drove to the house in that grey-blue hour when every roofline looks softer than it really is. The air had that damp, metallic feel Texas gets before the heat burns everything clean, and when I stepped out of the truck, I could hear sprinklers ticking somewhere down the block like a row of cheap clocks. I unlocked the side door to the garage instead of using the opener, mostly because I wanted to see the mess before the door framed it. Like a public display. Nothing had moved. Brenda's broken lamp still leaned at a tired angle against my wall. The fake lemon basket still sat on my tool chest. The white porcelain crane looked even stranger in the dim light, its glossy neck catching the yellow bulb over my workbench like it was proud to be there. I set my phone on a shelf, opened the camera app, and started documenting everything piece by piece. Wide shots first. Then corners. Then labels. Then close-ups of the bins, the cracked mirror, the warped cabinet, the note with temporary HOA storage written across it in that tidy little script. Years in repair work teach you a simple rule: if a problem is going to matter later, record it before anybody has a chance to rearrange the facts. By 5:50, I had timestamps, photos, and video from every angle that mattered. Then I did something Brenda clearly did not expect. I asked nicely, in writing. I sent a text to the number she had used for HOA notices and followed it with an email to the board address listed on the community website. I kept it clean, direct, impossible to misunderstand. Your personal property and additional items identified as HOA storage have been placed in my garage without my permission. Remove all items from my property by 6 p.m. today. Do not place any further items in my garage, driveway, or on my property. I also attached 3 photos, including the note. Then I left for my first job of the day, trying to ignore the smell of dust and old fabric still clinging to my shirt. At 8:17, while I was replacing weather seal on a detached garage in Cedar Park, my phone buzzed. Brenda. Of course she did not call. People like Brenda prefer written words when they think those words can be dressed up later. Her message was short. The board is aware of the temporary arrangement. Please do not interfere with association materials. We appreciate your cooperation. I read it twice, standing there with a strip of black rubber in one hand and a staple gun in the other, and felt that same cold, steady thing settle deeper in my chest. Association materials. She was still trying to rename junk into authority. I took a screenshot. Then another buzz came. Through around noon, this time from an unknown number. It was Kyle Mercer, one of the board members, a soft-spoken mortgage broker who always looked nervous at neighborhood meetings, like somebody had tricked him into attending his own life. He wrote, "Off the record, nobody voted on this. Brenda said you said it was fine for a few days." I stared at that message so long the customer had to repeat a question about insulation. That one text changed the shape of everything. Until then, I had figured Brenda was pulling her usual stunt, leaning on vague language and fake certainty. But now I knew she was feeding different stories to different people, which meant this was not just entitlement. It was narrative control. I wrote Kyle back with one sentence. I did not agree to any storage in my garage. He responded with a thumbs up and nothing else, which told me plenty. That evening I got home at 6:08, 2 minutes past the deadline I had given her, and before I even parked I could see the garage door again sitting slightly open. The same deliberate 2 feet. The same look at me posture. I walked up faster this time, remote in hand, pulse low and hard. When the door lifted, the stale smell rolled out first. Then I saw what she had done. Not removed anything. Added more. A framed chalkboard sign with some scripted seasonal quote. 2 sagging banker boxes. A rolled-up rug tied with twine. And sitting on my clean metal work table, like a signature at the bottom of a threat, was a fresh sheet of paper clipped to a clipboard. It read, "Overflow to remain until clubhouse reorganization is complete. Thank you for supporting your community." Beneath that, in Brenda's tight handwriting, she had added one extra line. "Please keep garage closed for appearances." I just stood there in the driveway with the last orange light of the day touching the rooftops behind me, reading that sentence over and over. She had filled my garage, ignored my written demand, lied to the board, then instructed me how to present her mess so the neighborhood would not see it. That was the moment the whole thing stopped being annoying and became useful. Because when somebody gets that comfortable crossing a line, they stop hiding how they do it. And when they stop hiding, you do not have to fight their story nearly as hard. You just have to let it finish telling on them. That night I did not touch a single piece of Brenda's junk. That part matters. People like her survive on reaction. They count on one angry move, one blurry decision, one moment where you get tired and make the mistake they have been quietly building toward. So I left everything exactly where it was and did what I always do when a machine starts making the wrong noise. I studied the pattern. I pulled a folding stool into the garage, set my laptop on the workbench she had half buried, and started digging through the neighborhood documents with the smell of old cardboard and dust sitting heavy in the warm air around me. The HOA website was a mess of cheerful stock photos, outdated newsletters, and that usual fake-friendly language associations use when they want power to sound like customer service. But buried under architectural forms and pool rules were the bylaws, meeting minutes, and a thin little policy packet about common property storage. I read every line with the garage light buzzing overhead and cicadas grinding outside in the dark. There it was by page 4. Association property could be stored only in designated common areas approved by board vote. Personal property of officers or residents was prohibited from being mixed with association assets. No board member could appropriate private homeowner space for community use without written consent. Written consent. I actually leaned back and laughed under my breath when I saw it, because Brenda had not just crossed a line. She had crossed one in writing, while pretending paperwork was her natural habitat. Then I opened the meeting minutes from the past 3 months. Same cast of characters. Budget notes. Landscaping complaints. Pool resurfacing delays. A whole 10-minute discussion about repainting the mailbox station. Not one word about clubhouse overflow. Not one word about using my garage. Not one vote. Not one motion. Just Brenda acting like a queen in a neighborhood that still thought clipboards were crowns. Around 10:15 my phone buzzed. Again. Kyle Mercer. One more off-the-record message. Brenda is trying to clear out the clubhouse because she is staging it for the real estate mixer next week. Says the storage closets look crowded and cheap. I stared at that text for a long second, then looked around my garage at the cracked lamp, fake lemons, banker boxes, and that chipped porcelain crane with the faded red ribbon. That was it. That was the whole engine under the hood. She was not solving a community problem. She was trying to make the clubhouse look polished for an event that would benefit her image, maybe her listings too, and she had decided my garage was the cheapest place to hide the evidence. She had turned my workspace into backstage storage for her performance. The next morning confirmed it. I left early for a service call in Georgetown and swung back by the house around 10:30 because I had forgotten a set of low-headroom brackets. As I turned onto my street, I saw Brenda's white SUV parked halfway across her driveway and 2 women carrying decorative lanterns into the clubhouse at the corner. The front doors were propped open. Through the glass I could see fresh flowers on the reception table, folded brochures, and a chalkboard sign with looping script that looked suspiciously like the one she had left in my garage. Even from the curb I could smell citrus cleaner and artificial vanilla drifting out of the building. She was polishing the public face of the neighborhood while my garage held the clutter she did not want visible. I did not stop. I just drove past slowly, let the scene settle in my head, and went to my job. On the way there I started connecting things I had brushed off before. The fake urgency. The staged language. The insistence that I keep my garage door closed for appearances. This was never about temporary storage. It was about hiding mess where she thought nobody important would see it. When I got home that evening, the street was quiet except for a lawn crew 2 houses down and the dry hiss of someone's sprinkler hitting pavement. I parked, walked into the garage, and took another full set of photos. Then I did one more thing. I made an inventory. Not because I cared about her stuff, but because details matter when a person like Brenda starts changing stories. Broken brass floor lamp. 2 yellow totes. 3 clear tubs with blue lids. Wicker basket with fake lemons. Framed chalkboard sign. Rolled rug tied with white twine. White porcelain crane with red ribbon. I said each item softly into my phone as I filmed, the same way I log parts on service calls. Calm. Specific. Hard to argue with later. By the time I finished, my irritation had burned down into something much more useful. Clarity. Brenda thought I was cornered because I needed my garage. She thought inconvenience would push me into emotional, messy decisions. But standing there in that stale air, with the concrete still warm under my boots and that ridiculous crane gleaming under the shop light, I realized she had handed me something better than a confrontation. She had handed me a clean timeline, written proof, a lying witness, and a pile of property she clearly wanted hidden fast. And when somebody wants something hidden that badly, you do not always beat them by dragging it to court first. Sometimes you beat them by making it visible. Friday settled over Willow Creek hot and windless, The kind of evening where the air feels stuck between houses and every sound carries farther than it should. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky was turning that dusty orange that makes everything look calmer than it is, and I already knew what I was going to do. Not because I had lost my temper. Because I had finally found the right tool. I went into the garage, set my keys on the workbench, and stood there for a full minute looking at Brenda's inventory like I was pricing out a job. The fake lemons. The banker boxes. The rolled rug. The cracked mirror. The busted lamp. The white porcelain crane with the faded red ribbon around its neck. Nothing in that room said valuable. What it all said was hidden. Hidden from the clubhouse. Hidden from the mixer. Hidden from the polished little image Brenda was selling to anybody with a wallet and a smile. The shop light hummed overhead while I opened my laptop, logged into the local neighborhood marketplace pages, and started drafting exactly 3 words that I knew would move faster than any legal notice on earth. Free curb pickup. I did not post right away. First I brought everything out one piece at a time and set it at the edge of my driveway where the streetlight would catch it after dark. No throwing. No damage. Just orderly placement, clean and visible, like a donation pile at the end of an estate sale. The concrete still held the heat of the day through the soles of my boots. Cicadas buzzed in the trees. Somewhere down the block, a basketball hit a driveway in slow, steady thumps. I carried out the broken lamp first, then the totes, then the chalkboard sign, then the rug. The fake lemon basket made me laugh again when I set it beside the curb because it looked so proud of itself in the fading light. Last came the porcelain crane. I held it carefully by the base, feeling the cool glazed ceramic under my hands, and for 1 second I considered leaving it inside just to spare myself the risk of hearing Brenda complain about something fragile. Then I looked at that red ribbon and remembered the note taped to my bin, the lie to the board, the instruction to keep my garage closed for appearances, and I set the crane down front and center where anybody could see it. Then I took photos. Clear ones. Wide shots. Close-ups. Everything laid out neatly with my house number visible. After that, I made the post. Free curb pickup. Assorted household items. First come, first served. No holds. Tonight only. I uploaded 6 photos to 3 local pages and 1 neighborhood by nothing group, then I sat on a folding chair in the garage with the door open and waited. It took 9 minutes. A silver pickup slowed first. A young couple got out, looked over the boxes, whispered to each other, and loaded the rug and 2 tubs. Then an older man in a ball cap stopped for the lamp and the chalkboard sign. A woman in scrubs took the fake lemons and the basket like she had been hunting them all week. Nobody asked questions because free things on a Friday night do not need backstory. They just need timing. By 8:15, half the pile was gone. By 8:40, there were headlights every few minutes, car doors opening and closing, the scrape of cardboard sliding, the soft clink of ceramic, the cheerful little sounds of other people solving their own small needs with Brenda's hidden overflow. I stayed where I was and filmed enough to show the pace, the order, the fact that every item left my property because someone chose to take it after I made it publicly available. Around 9:05, the porcelain crane finally went. A college kid in an old Honda Civic picked it up with both hands, squinted at the ribbon, grinned like he had found treasure, and eased it into his back seat. Watching that ridiculous bird disappear into the night did something wonderful to my blood pressure. By 10:10, the curb was bare. The driveway looked wider. The garage looked like mine again. I swept the last dust ring from where the bins had sat, rolled my tool cart back into place, and breathed in the good familiar smells that had been buried all week beneath mildew and stale fabric. Motor oil. Dry wood. Clean metal. My space. I closed the garage around 10:30 and went to bed with the first real peace I had felt in days. Then at 6:03 the next morning, I woke to a hard, urgent knocking at my front door. Not polite. Not patient. The kind of knock that assumes panic is an acceptable greeting. I already knew who it was before I even looked at the camera feed, but seeing Brenda on my porch in a white tennis visor, jaw set tight, empty clipboard in one hand and my printed marketplace photos in the other, still felt better than coffee. I opened the door before she could knock again. Morning air slid into the hallway, cool and sharp, carrying the smell of wet grass and automatic sprinklers from somewhere across the street. Brenda stood on my porch in spotless white sneakers, visor pulled low, mouth pinched so tight it looked painful. In one hand she held a clipboard. In the other, 3 printed screenshots of my post, already creased from how hard she was gripping them. She did not say good morning. She did not ask a question. She lifted the papers between us like an accusation and said, "Where is my property?" Her voice had lost all that polished neighborhood sweetness. Now it sounded thin and metallic, like something stretched too far. I leaned one shoulder against the doorframe and let a beat pass before I answered. The items that were left in my garage without permission were removed from my property last night. Brenda blinked fast, the way people do when they realize the script in their head is not being followed. Removed by who? By the community, apparently, I said. The post worked faster than I expected. For 1 second she just stared at me. Then the color in her face shifted. Not red. Not dramatic. Just that washed out look people get when control starts slipping and they can feel others noticing. You had no right, she snapped. Those items were being stored for association purposes. I almost smiled at that. Even now, standing on my porch at 6 in the morning, she was still trying to dress up junk with official language. I kept my voice level. You were told in writing to remove your items from my garage. You ignored that. You added more. You put instructions in my workspace telling me to hide it for appearances. Her jaw moved once, like she was biting down on a better lie. I never gave you permission to dispose of anything, she said. And I never gave you permission to use my garage as a storage unit, I said. The street behind her was starting to wake up. A dog walker slowed near the mailbox cluster. A man 2 houses down rolled his trash bin toward the curb and looked over just long enough to pretend he was not looking. Brenda noticed it too. You could see her posture shift as she recalculated the audience. Then she lowered her voice and tried a different version of herself. Ethan, this could have been handled privately. That line almost impressed me. Not because it was smart, but because it was so predictable. People who create public messes always rediscover the value of privacy the second consequences arrive. I folded my arms and looked past her toward the driveway where my garage sat closed, finally clean, finally mine. You had several chances to handle it privately, I said. Text. Email. Deadline. Camera footage. You chose not to. Her eyes flicked toward the garage, then back to me. Camera footage, she repeated, quieter now. I nodded once. Everything. Items entering. Dates. Times. The note. Your messages. The post. The pickups. That was the moment the confidence went out of her shoulders. Not all at once. Just enough. Like air leaving a tire, one slow hiss at a time. She stood there in her white visor and polished sneakers, holding papers that no longer meant what she wanted them to mean, and I could almost see her running through the math. Board members. Neighbors. The mixer. Kyle Mercer. The clubhouse closets. The fact that all of this started because she assumed a man who worked with his hands would be too busy to document what she did with hers. Finally she said, I want the names of everyone who took those items. I let out a small breath through my nose. Free pickup does not come with a guest list, Brenda. She looked at me for another second, then turned and walked down the path without another word. No goodbye. No threat. Just that clipped, brittle silence of somebody carrying an empty clipboard back to a house full of very new problems. I watched her go, then closed the door gently, the latch clicking shut with a sound so clean and final it felt better than winning an argument. By noon, Willow Creek had done what neighborhoods always do when somebody important slips in public. It started in fragments. A text from Kyle Mercer asking if I was free that evening in case the board needed clarification. A missed call from a number I recognized as the clubhouse office. Then 2 different neighbors I barely knew slowed their cars near my driveway with that curious half-wave people give when they want information but also plausible deniability. The air outside had turned thick and bright, sunlight bouncing off windshields hard enough to make me squint as I loaded spring assemblies into the truck. Even with the garage door open behind me and my tools finally back where they belonged, I could feel the story moving up and down the street faster than any official notice Brenda had ever taped to a mailbox. Around 2:30, while I was finishing a track alignment at a house near Brushy Creek, my phone buzzed with an email from the HOA board. Special executive meeting at 6:30 p.m. regarding a property dispute and misuse of association authority. Misuse of association authority. That wording alone told me Brenda had already lost control of the headline. I got home just after 6, changed out of my work shirt, and walked to the clubhouse under a sky the color of warm steel. The building looked polished enough to be in a brochure. Lanterns by the entrance. Fresh mums in planters. Citrus cleaner floating through the open doors. Brenda had gotten her staged clubhouse all right. She just had not planned on the audience arriving with questions. Inside, the room smelled like air freshener, coffee gone lukewarm on a side table, and the faint paper dry scent of fresh printouts. Kyle stood near the folding chairs with his tie loosened and his expression already apologetic. 2 other board members sat at the front with legal pads open. Brenda was there too, upright in a pale blue blouse, lips pressed thin, trying to look like a victim of confusion instead of the author of it. She had even placed that same empty clipboard in front of her like it still carried power. I took a seat, set my folder on my lap, and waited. The meeting started with formal language, but it did not stay formal for long. One board member, a retired accountant named Linda Perez, asked Brenda whether there had ever been a vote authorizing storage in a homeowner's garage. Brenda said the matter had been administratively handled. Linda asked again. Yes or no? Brenda said no. Then Kyle, to his credit, spoke up and admitted Brenda had told at least one board member that I had consented. I watched Brenda's eyes flick toward him with that quick, cold look people save for betrayal they think should have remained polite. Then it was my turn. I did not speechify. I did not raise my voice. I opened the folder and handed over exactly what mattered. Photos with timestamps. Printed texts. The email deadline. Screenshots of the bylaw section on storage and written consent. The note labeled temporary HOA storage. A still image from the camera showing additional items brought in after my written demand. Another showing the clipboard left on my work table instructing me to keep the garage closed for appearances. The room got very quiet. After that. Not dramatic quiet. Administrative quiet. The kind where people stop pretending this is a misunderstanding and start calculating liability. Brenda tried one last angle. She said the items had community relevance and were never intended to remain long-term. Linda picked up the photo of the fake lemon basket and just looked at her over the top of it. Community relevance, she repeated, in a voice dry enough to salt roads. Brenda did not answer. Then Kyle mentioned the real estate mixer. Then another board member asked whether association property had been displaced so the clubhouse would photograph better for outside guests. Brenda's face changed at that. Barely. But enough. Enough for everybody to see that this had never been about the community. It had been about image. About appearance. About moving mess out of sight and assuming my garage counted as out of sight because I was just Ethan, the divorced repair guy with calloused hands and a truck payment. By the time the meeting ended, the board had voted to suspend Brenda from officer duties pending a full review of her conduct and spending authorizations tied to the mixer. She was instructed not to issue notices, act on behalf of the association, or communicate board decisions until that review was complete. No one clapped. No one needed to. The sound that mattered most was smaller than that. It was the dry slide of Brenda gathering her papers with hands that no longer looked steady, then standing up in a room that had finally stopped rearranging itself to protect her. The clubhouse doors closed behind me with a soft hydraulic sigh, and for the first time in weeks the night air felt clean. No mildew. No stale cardboard. No fake vanilla trying to hide somebody else's mess. Just warm Texas darkness, the faint scent of fresh mulch by the entrance, and the far-off hum of traffic rolling down the highway beyond our subdivision walls. I walked home slowly, not because I had anywhere else to be, but because I wanted to feel the weight come off in real time. The streetlights cast long pale bands across the sidewalk. Sprinklers clicked on somewhere near the mailbox cluster. A moth bounced itself stupid against one of the lamps by the pool gate. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary neighborhood stuff. That was all I had wanted from Willow Creek in the first place. Not power. Not drama. Just a place where I could work, pay my bills, keep my tools in order, and shut my own garage door at night without finding somebody else's life stacked behind it. When I reached my driveway, I stood there for a second looking at the house the way you look at something after a storm passes. Same concrete. Same siding. Same garage door. But it felt different because the line had held. I punched the remote, and the door rolled up with that familiar rattling rise I knew better than most people know their own front door locks. Inside, everything was where it belonged. My ladder rack clear. My bins lined up by size. My rolling tool chest clean except for the little scuff mark where Brenda's wicker basket had Saturday. The concrete floor was bare except for a faint rectangular outline where one of her storage tubs had collected dust around its edges. I left that mark there for a couple of days, just to remind myself how fast people like her can spread when you let politeness outrun boundaries. On Monday morning, the neighborhood woke up to a very different version of Brenda Whitmore. No violation notices. No white SUV crawling the cul-de-sacs at 10 miles an hour. No sudden mailbox lectures about acceptable paint colors. By lunch, the board had sent out a carefully worded email saying officer responsibilities were being reassigned temporarily while an internal review was conducted. Temporary. Funny word. The same word Brenda had tried to use like a crowbar on my property. Now it was circling back around and landing in her lap. Later that week, Kyle stopped by with a 6-pack of sparkling water and an awkward thank you, which told me the board had discovered more than just my garage issue. Apparently, once people started checking storage records and event expenses, other things began looking less like oversight and more like habit. I did not ask for details. I did not need them. That is another thing people misunderstand about justice. It does not always need front row seats. Sometimes it is enough to know the machine finally started turning. The best part came Thursday just after sunset. I was reorganizing a bin of rollers and hinge brackets when I heard footsteps on the driveway. I looked up and saw Mrs. Alvarez from 3 houses over holding a covered plate of still warm enchiladas. Behind her was Mr. Hargrove, the retired principal, carrying a small potted fern for the garage shelf. Then Kyle. Then a younger couple from the end of the street. Nothing formal. Nobody said support group or solidarity or thank you for standing up to her. They just hovered in that easy American way neighbors do when everybody understands the subject without naming it too hard. We stood around my open garage talking about weather, property taxes, broken gate motors, and the mixer nobody enjoyed. At one point Mrs. Alvarez looked around at my shelves, nodded once, and said, "This is a good workspace." Simple sentence.